you say scientists have been studying them since I guess they started and before.
Yep.
Is this a cohesive group of scientists, or you've sort of intimated that they're not, that there are people who come at it from several different directions and so forth? They have to have your permission, I
Yes.
assume, to go there.
Yes.
Have you been tempted to say no?
Yes, I have to one group. No, the story there is there are a lot of different specialists and scientists that want to go there. Most of them are in the summer or the fall or the spring. They go there to see the piping plovers, to see the oyster catchers, to see the Microtus brewery, the beach vole. They go there to see the ants, to see the spiders. The reason they go, and the reason I'm writing this book, is you can see species and territorial change, dynamic change in a bottle. I mean, it's just there. It's unique, and therefore you can see it in a short period of time in a bottle, so to speak. That's why so many scientists want to go there. One of them, and I'll get to your question, one of them, and they do have to get our approval. We have, the island is a natural national landmark, so it's listed by the federal government. We have a conservation restriction on the entire island with the Nantucket Land Bank and Land Council. And I like to help the, we feel, I and my family feel like stewards. We don't feel we own the island. We want it to be forever wild. That's the phrase I use. It deserves it. And so I start from that. And I should say by the side that 4 or 5 speculators that I will mention have tried to get involved in the island for very different reasons. But to your question, there's 2 things that are happening with the scientists. Number one, it depends on which group you're talking about. By far the biggest group from 4 different institutions because of the gray seals now. Now, I said earlier somewhat cavalierly that one of the threats to the island is the scientists. In the book I'm writing, I call them the nerd scientists. And my real complaint is not a big surprise. They're all in their little silos of interest. Their little species silo. They've got a grant about ants, and that's their specialty, and that's all they talk about or think about. And I've been telling them, look, somehow you got to think about the entire ecosystem of this island, because it's very, very fragile. And the more you talk together, perhaps the more there will be funds to look at some of the climate change issues rather than just
what a novel idea.
Yeah. And they're because of a particular group from MIT, they're beginning to pay attention to that. And so I do have sort of a casual veto power. And there was one group from New England College in Maine that was down there a lot studying the seals, and I kept pushing the department head to say, why don't some of your postdoc people look at the whole island rather than the harmonics of a bull to a cow? I mean, it was very narrow stuff. And they didn't do it, and they didn't do it. And then I found, somebody else told me, that in one of their pamphlets to market the department and its programs, they cited Muskegon as a field trip, as though it was one of theirs. And that's not kosher at all.
Right. Yeah,
so
you are presumably, by your affiliation, in favor of thinning out the gray seal population?
I am. We've had a lot of discussion about that while I've been down here, because your viewers may not know this, but I guess it was December 18th to be particular, all of a sudden, somewhat unexpectedly, NOAA, who is the overall supervisor of protected species at sea, came out with a statement asking for public responses about which protected species have becoming a public danger, was one thing, or for whatever reason, different public interests think that they're overabundant. There were three categories, but those were, the most important was negatively impacting the fish catch. And obviously, you know about the commercial.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
We had a month to make a statement, and a lot of different groups have answered that. I work a lot with the people here at SAC, and I know them a lot, and they're very serious people. And I had a lot, you know, I'm one of the executive committee people with that. Pete being another.
Yeah, he was on a couple, probably a year and a half ago.
Yeah,
Talking
and Peter
about,
Crow
Yes.
was the guy that started it. And he, you know, they're serious people. And so I worked a lot with them, and we decided that my statement ought to be Muskeget unique. I mean, which I have put in, and what did I say in the end of it? I said in the end that because of all this pressures on Muskeget itself, it seemed clear to me that NOAA ought to take as its responsibility to try to determine, select, and start utilizing the best humane seal deterrent gadget that would work. And there is a lot of different things around where typically they're noise things that you put in the water, and the seals don't like it, and they sort of gradually disperse. And
where would they go?
well, New Jersey. I mean, whoever's
Why not eat them?
well, you know, that's a very interesting question, because there is an entrepreneur from Ottawa that's been in touch with SAC, and I'm sure others, because he has started I don't know how successful it is. Well, it's obviously successful. It's relatively small, but he is using gray seal hides, flesh, different things, part of which you can use in Canada. In Canada, there is a culling process, and one of the things, I've lived a lot of my life, 6 years in Japan, and I think that there'd be a heck of a market there for raw seal, actually, but that's way out there, that idea. But you know, you don't know, and we're having a big argument within the seal abatement group here. Is our responsibility to just get public attention on our side that something has to be done, or should we go the next step and try to suggest what best thing could be done? And I'm on the former part of that. I don't think that's a job description. I could go more and more into it, but
that's a subject one could debate for a long time, and you obviously have.
Yeah. No, not just debate it, but there are different fascinating elements that I wasn't even aware of. I mean, amazingly, I just found out that the scientists with all this stuff, they don't really know, unlike a gray seal, unlike a salmon, whatever it might be, they don't really know whether the migration process is instinctive in every gray seal, and those staying at Muskeget are aberrational or not. They don't know if a pup automatically returns to where it was birthed. I mean, those are very basic.
If it does.
If it does.
You've got, I mean, if it does, you've
No.
got a problem.
Exactly, exactly. And I just did the mathematics, which is a little scary. If, in fact, they typically migrate, which we all think to be the case, if, in fact, those in Muskeget and a few at Great Point and stuff are the first outliers that aren't, which is what we think to be the case, if you could get the Muskeget herd only migrating again over 3 or 4 or 5 years, the change could be huge, because I started doing the mathematics of it. There are 1,800,000 sealed days in the Cape and Islands because of the Muskeget unmigrating seals. I mean, that's amazing.
How big is
and they eat, typically, small ones eat 7 to 8 pounds a day. The bigger ones up to 20 pounds. So 1,800,000 seal days just in that 3 months that they're not migrating. If that could.
What happened? How many are there up at Sable Island?
Many, many more. It's huge. It's 25 miles,
Right.
and the estimate is 250 to 400,000. Now the Canadians aren't so worried about it because they still allow native and others to take some of the pups.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't
Whack
club them
away,
anymore,
yeah.
but they do that, and it's I if I was really getting into it, I should go up there. I'm not getting into it that much. This is a chapter of my life.
What other are the other high points of your book?
Well, I'm doing one chapter on trespassers, adventurers, speculators, and regulators, because they've all been in and around the island. I've dealt with them all, and some of the most. There's some very interesting people that have been there. Paul Thoreau and JFK. I was kayaking with him there before he had us, and a lot of very interesting people. But some other people have tried to get involved. Ivan Boesky wanted to buy the island from us, if you remember that name.
Indeed, I do.
Several local people from Sconset had some pretty wild ideas that approached me with. So that's fun and interesting.
What about prohibition?
I am writing about that, yep. And I had always been told the story by my father and others that the rum runners had landed on the island and had buried more than 2,000 cases of booze there. That story was always in the wind, and I tried to really get to the root of it, and I think I have pretty much now. There's one very important part of it that I can't tie down. But yes, there was a wreck off Tuckernuck in 1925, 24, excuse me, day after Christmas. And the life station guys that were still the life station for 2 more years. They saved the crew, dropped them on Tuckernuck, saved the booze, brought it to Muskeget, and locked it up in a shed. That much I've gotten from enough sources that it's got to be what happened. The question that still...
What happened to it next?
Yes. It is. I have determined that some of it, it took 3 or 4 or 5 days for the Coast Guard from Nantucket to get out there and pick it up. I've learned that in the last 2 days. Before they got there, preparing for that, they went to the shed and found out some boards had been taken out and the bottles had been taken. What I'm still struggling with, and I think it's the bigger story. Initially somebody said a couple of bottles, 10, 12, something, big deal.
Case, maybe.
Yeah, it's what you drink at night.
Right.
No,
I drink domestic stuff.
And it was called, this was Scotch whiskey coming from Canada. That much is also known. I am more and more convinced, and I've been working on this, and I'm going to the Nantucket Historical Society tomorrow to try to tie it down, but there's more evidence that all of it disappeared, which means, roughly 2,000 cases. And I had always heard the story, I haven't tied this down, but that the rum runners got in hoots with some Pinkertons, and it was Pinkertons that went to Muskeget to pick up the booze. Now, I'm getting closer to that. It's a hell of a story if true.
As you know, I made some inquiries about the subject for you.
You did?
I've
been back to that fellow twice.
I know, but I asked somebody else who I never told
good.
you about, who's 90-ish.
Yeah.
And she said, no, I don't know anything about that, but, so-and-so from Sconset was a rum runner. And I thought to myself, that was a fellow who used to run sightseeing buses around here, or at least his son.
I'm sure there were several.
Yeah,
there had to be. There absolutely had to be. And there were two in my writing, I'm doing a little bit about known recorded wreck off Tuckernuck, a different wreck, and another one off Martha's Vineyard in the Muskegon Channel. That one was really sinister. All people were killed. It was a pirate thing, and they cut their throats. And
Nice.
And
but they came from the Vineyard, right, or Chappaquiddick or somewhere.
They were all over the paper. No, it was a pirate thing, and the ship had Canadian.
I mean, the
ale.
pirates came from the Vineyard.
Yeah, no, they came from Seattle Seahawks. But they've never found the people. But that was pretty bloody, obviously.
Yeah.
And the record of it in Tuckernuck of the other one is that there are several houses over there that they still have the ceramic bottles that they
washed up,
that they emptied
They
first.
emptied. All right, didn't wash up.
And I suspect there's more stories because I mean, given the number of years, 12 years, and it just makes sense.
Well, there were a couple of people I talked to who clearly didn't want to talk either. So, yeah, it's an interesting story. When's the book going to come out?
As soon as I get a check from you. No, I think I'll be finished with pretty much finished by the time I
Do you have
leave.
a title for it yet?
Yes, I do. The Restless, Relentless Island. I talked to one self-publishing person that I like yesterday. I've got several others that are friends, and I know some publishers. I didn't really want to roll it out at all until I was 90% done. And I think it's going to be pretty readable. Obviously, I have a chapter, Father and Sons, because all my 5 sons have had different memories of it, and they're pretty rich. And there's been another chapter is about all the accidents that have happened, even when we've had it, either by a pilot or a ship.
What's the longest period of time you and your family spent there?
In one period of time.
One period of time.
For me, it was a little less than 3 weeks. I was there alone. My father, after college, I was going in the Navy at OCS in Newport, and I spent just short of 3 weeks there. And it was sort of scary being there alone. I didn't even have a dog. Normally, we have a hunting dog because we do a lot of duck hunting there. We used to. And one of my sons had his 50th birthday in June, and he was there alone for a couple of days, and then his friends came. But I suppose the 3 weeks.
I'm sure it made an impression on you.
Oh, no, it's made a huge impression on all my kids. And when I look in the logs, we've kept logs of all of our visits, and I've spent a lot of time going back in them. And it's amazing to me how this tiny little wisp of an island has had an impact on us, and would anybody. That it's so wild, and it's so natural. And I should also tell you, I think, I'm not sure whether I was very worried for a while. My nightmare was that Cape Wind would go through. I had mixed feelings about it generally, but I got more and more troubled because had it gone through as designed, the corner of it would have been less than 2 nautical miles from the edge of Muskegon. And inevitably the impact, I mean, both in the sky, obviously, at night particularly, but I had this nightmare that the town of Nantucket would think that, because the selectmen had access to the western part of it. I think you know that.
That's right. The town, or is it the land bank that owns it?
Well, now it's conservation, so the town doesn't, but it did. Technically, the town, our family and the town are the co-owners, technically, under the terms of the... But I was really worried that before we got the conservation restriction through, now you can't do anything like that, but that some guy would wake up and say, boy, we could put some warehouses there. There's no power, there's no nothing, but they could use it as a staging point that's what was in my head.
For Cape Wind, or for something south of the islands?
Well, for Cape Wind, because it was so close.
Right.
I mean, that was my real fear. And I've had some other ones too. But now it's pretty well protected.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's a fascinating story,
Yeah,
Crocker.
it really is.
sometime I'd like to get you back and talk about the rest of your life. But this is, I think, a timely and interesting subject, and I think I will, for one, will look forward to reading your book.
Well, as you can tell, I like to talk about it right now because I'm completely in it.
Crocker Snow, thank you very much.
Thank you.